Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of absolute surgical precision. Like you break your arm, you go to the hospital, and the X-ray pulls up that stark, jagged white line on the monitor.
Right. And the doctor just points at it.
Exactly. They just point at it.
Yeah.
There is immense comfort in that visible, undeniable proof. It's either broken or not broken.
Yeah, it's clean. It's completely binary.
It is. It's clean. We inherently crave that level of measurable, visible accounting in our lives.
Oh, we absolutely do.
Mm-hmm.
Human beings are deeply uncomfortable with ambiguity.
Yeah.
We want our ledgers balanced, our categories defined, and our realities mapped out in a way we can just point to and verify.
But then, and this is where it gets interesting, think about what happens when you step out of that orthopedics ward and into the realm of human psychology.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, things like trauma, resilience, or, neurodevelopment. Suddenly, that crisp X-ray machine is utterly useless.
It really is. You're standing in a diagnostic landscape that is just profoundly murky.
You are. You're trying to measure the immeasurable. And I think that same fundamental tension, that visceral tug of war between wanting an exact, terrifyingly measurable accounting of everything we do, while simultaneously needing a profound, almost unquantifiable emotional safety net. I mean, that applies perfectly to the paradox we're exploring today.
It really does.
So welcome to our deep dive into our provided sources. Today we are exploring a psychological and theological paradox that will completely reframe how you view your daily interactions.
It's a massive shift.
It is. We are looking at two ancient foundational Arabic concepts, two specific attributes of the divine that seem, at least at first glance, to pull the human psyche into entirely opposite, mutually exclusive directions.
It is a phenomenal paradox to unpack.
Right.
Because on one side, we have the concept of al-hasib,
Right.
which translates fundamentally to the but simultaneously, it means the sufficient.
Which is wild.
It is. And then on the other side, we have ad-dayan.
Okay, and what does that one mean?
That translates to the requiter, or the ultimate judge. And we are not simply embarking on an ancient linguistics lesson today.
No, definitely not.
Our mission for this deep dive is to investigate how these specific concepts of ultimate cosmic justice, this absolute, inescapable, microscopic accounting of human behavior, somehow manage to coexist alongside the concept of complete, unconditional divine sufficiency.
Because when a person actually internalizes these two ideas, it completely rewires their psychology.
Absolutely. It alters their baseline behavior. It fundamentally restructures how they interact with everyone around them.
From their closest family members to a random stranger on the street, right?
Exactly.
That is exactly the puzzle we need to solve. How does a single human mind hold both of these realities at the exact same time?
It's a lot to hold.
It really is. You have this belief that every single breath you take, every penny you spend, every slight, every lingering glance is being recorded for a brutal cosmic audit. And in the very same breath, you hold the belief that you are completely, utterly taken care of by a divine safety net that provides for your every single need.
Right.
How do those coexist without snapping your sanity in half?
Well, to figure that out, we really have to start with the roots of these words.
Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with al-hasib. This word has a deeply fascinating dual meaning.
It really does.
On one hand, it stems directly from the Arabic root for counting, calculating, or auditing. Like it literally means the reckoner.
The entity who preserves and calculates every single deed with mathematical perfection.
Mathematical perfection. But the second meaning, growing out of that exact same linguistic root, is the sufficient.
Right. The term in Arabic is kafi.
Kafi, and it describes an entity who gives you enough to satisfy you completely, like someone who pours into your life until you literally have to hold up your hands and say, enough, I am totally satisfied.
Yeah, and it's a concept that appears 3 separate times in the Quran.
And the linguistic synergy there, it's not accidental, is it?
Not at all. The underlying implication is that only the entity capable of keeping a perfect, exhaustive account of your reality is actually capable of knowing exactly what is sufficient for you.
Wow. Okay, that makes sense. Only the ultimate auditor knows what you actually need.
Exactly. And then we move to the second concept, a dayan.
Right.
This one stems from an Arabic root dealing with debt, judgment, or even custom. It describes the ruling judge, the requiter who subdues creation, and the ultimate authority who settles all outstanding accounts.
And there's a famous Arabic proverb you mentioned earlier that captures this, right?
Yes, kama tadinu
Yeah.
tudam. It translates roughly to, as you judge, you shall be judged.
Or the manner in which you treat others is the exact manner in which you will be treated.
Exactly. Interestingly, though, the term ad-dayan doesn't actually appear directly in the text of the Quran itself.
Wait, really? It doesn't?
No, it doesn't.
Ugh.
Rather, it is firmly established in the prophetic traditions, the Sunnah. And it was vigorously analyzed and affirmed by major historical theologians like Ibn al-Qayyim and Ibn Manda.
I really want to linger on how heavily this concept of ad-dayan weighed on the minds of early believers, because there is this incredible, almost cinematic historical anecdote from our sources that illustrates it perfectly.
Oh, the story of Jabir.
Yes. We have this man named Jabir bin Abdullah. Now, Jabir hears a rumor. He finds out that another man, Abdullah bin Unais, who lives hundreds of miles away in Syria, knows a very specific saying, a hadith, directly from the Prophet.
Right.
And Jabir has never heard this specific saying. Let's put this in perspective for you, the listener. Today, if you hear about a new piece of information, what do? You send a text.
You shoot off an email.
You Google it. It takes 4 seconds.
Right.
What does Jabir do in the 7th century? He physically goes out, purchases a camel, packs his saddle with provisions, and begins a journey.
A very long journey.
A full, grueling month through the unforgiving desert to Syria. A month of blistering heat risking bandits, disease, starvation.
And why? Simply to hear this one single sentence directly from the source before either of them died. The existential urgency of that journey is, it's hard for the modern mind to fully grasp. When Jabir finally arrives at Abdullah's door, the very first thing he says is that he was terrified one of them would pass away before the transmission of this knowledge could happen.
He wasn't traveling for trade.
Right?
He wasn't traveling for politics. He risked his life for an epistemological certainty. He needed to know the exact phrasing of reality.
And the saying he risked his life to hear.
Right. The saying was specifically about the divine declaring himself as ad-dayan on the Day of Judgment. The sources describe this terrifying scene where humanity will be gathered completely naked and stripped of all possessions, and God will call out with a voice that defies physical acoustics.
Heard from afar exactly as it is heard from near.
Exactly, saying, I am the king. I am ad-dayan. Jabir gave up a month of his life just to secure the linguistic reality of that coming courtroom.
It shows how real it was to them.
It really does. But I mean, I have to admit, my modern sensibilities get a little stuck here. Because normally in our society, we separate the auditor from the caretaker.
Think about it. The IRS agent who audits your taxes with a fine-tooth comb is not the person tucking you into bed, making you soup when you're sick, and ensuring your emotional needs are met.
No, they definitely are.
Right. We inherently view the judge as adversarial to our comfort. So how does a person view the ultimate auditor, Al-Hasib, as simultaneously the ultimate provider without experiencing severe psychological whiplash?
Well, what's fascinating here is if we connect this to the bigger picture of human sociology, we bifurcate those roles because human beings are fundamentally limited in their emotional bandwidth.
Okay, how so?
A human judge has to be detached. They have to be almost cold and clinical to maintain their objectivity, because human emotion corrupts human justice.
That makes sense.
Conversely, a human provider, like a mother or a father, is deeply attached, often to the profound detriment of objectivity.
Oh, for sure. A parent will overlook glaring, horrific flaws in their child because their love blinds their judgment. Exactly.
Yeah.
But the theological framework here argues that within the divine, these two realities are not contradictory. They are a perfect, seamless synthesis.
A synthesis. Okay.
Knowing that the ultimate judge, the entity, who sees every hidden flaw, every secret manipulation, every dark thought, is the exact same entity who is entirely sufficient for your needs. It creates a completely unique psychological equilibrium.
An equilibrium of awe and comfort, right?
Yes. It generates an immense sense of awe because you are stripped bare and cannot hide a single atom of your reality from the reckoner. But it also generates a profound, unparalleled comfort because the one holding the ledger of your failures is the very source of your sustenance.
So you aren't standing before a cold algorithmic machine.
No, you are standing before the architect of your provision.
I see what you're saying. Because if it were just the IRS agent in the sky, we would all just, collapse into utter despair.
We would.
We'd just give up, knowing we could never pass the audit. But if it were just the doting, unconditional parent in the sky, we would become completely lawless.
Entitled, Spoiled Toddlers on a Cosmic Scale.
Exactly. Thinking our actions have zero consequences. Fusing Al-Hasib and Ad-Dayan creates this incredibly potent psychology. It's hyper-accountability wrapped in an indestructible safety blanket.
It serves as the ultimate psychological anchor. The human condition oscillates wildly between arrogance and despair. This dual concept stabilizes that oscillation.
It pulls a person into a state of mindful, conscientious living without allowing them to fall into paralyzing anxiety.
Exactly.
That makes profound sense in theory. But, theory only gets us so far. If we really want to understand the reckoner aspect of these names, we have to look at how this cosmic accounting actually works in practice.
The mechanics of the ledger.
Yes. According to the sources, Al-Hasib and Ad-Dayan guarantee a flawless accounting system, and they don't mean generally flawless.
No, they mean micro-flawless.
Everything is documented down to the metaphorical weight of a mustard seed. But I want to push back on something here.
Okay.
Because the historical accounts state that all of this, every action, every word, was written down in a preserved tablet 50,000 years before the creation of the heavens and the earth. Let's be real. If the cosmic ledger was written before the earth even cooled, doesn't that completely obliterate the concept of human free will?
Right.
I mean, why should you or I even try to be good if the ink dried 50 millennia ago?
That is the classic, quintessential philosophical trap that listeners often fall into when engaging with the concept of divine prescience.
So how do we get out of the trap?
The error lies in conflating descriptive knowledge with prescriptive enforcement. Let me offer a conceptual bridge.
Please do.
Imagine you are standing on a tall mountain, looking down at a winding road. You see a car speeding toward a blind intersection.
Okay.
You also see a massive truck speeding toward that same intersection from the cross street. From your elevated vantage point, you know with absolute certainty that they are going to crash in about 10 seconds.
Because I can see the whole picture.
Right. Your knowledge of that event is perfect. But did your knowledge cause the crash? Did you force the driver to speed?
No, I just had a perspective that allowed me to see the inevitable outcome of their choices before they experienced it.
Precisely. The theology posits that the divine exists entirely outside the construct of human time.
So time is a created dimension.
Yes, like gravity or electromagnetism. God is not riding the timeline along with us, waiting to see what happens tomorrow. He encompasses the entirety of time, past, present, and future simultaneously.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Therefore, the ledger written 50,000 years ago is simply a reflection of his perfect knowledge of what you will freely choose to do in your timeline.
So it is descriptive of your free will, not a script forcing your actions.
Exactly. You are still making the choices. The divine just already knows the choices you will ultimately finalize.
Okay, that clears up the timeline issue, but what about the real-time recording?
The scribes.
Right, because the sources also detail that it's not just a dusty ancient tablet. There are angelic scribes actively, in real time, recording every single word and action as they happen.
Not a word does he utter, but there is a watcher by him, ready.
Yes, that intense verse. I was reading the accounts from the scholar Ibn Abbas regarding this, and I honestly had to stop and reread it to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding.
It's very thorough.
He claims that these angelic scribes literally write down everything, not just the big stuff, not just the prayers, the lies, the thefts, or the major life milestones.
No.
He says they record the most utterly mundane filler words of human existence. The scribes are writing down, I ate, I drank, I walked to the door, I looked out the window.
It is an unfiltered raw data transcript of your entire life.
But that level of microsurveillance sounds exhausting. Why on earth would the cosmic ledger need to record the mundane fluff?
Well, the sheer scale of the data collection is meant to underscore the inescapable reality of Al-Hasib.
So if it missed something, it wouldn't be absolute.
Right. If the system missed the fact that you drank a glass of water, it wouldn't be an absolute reckoning. However, Ibn Abbas provides a fascinating addendum to this.
The Thursday Review.
Yes. He explains that while the raw data collection is exhaustive, there's an editorial process. On Thursdays, this massive, sprawling record is actively reviewed.
Okay.
The morally relevant actions, the good deeds and the bad deeds, are preserved for the final judgment. And the irrelevant fluff, the mere I ate, I drank, is discarded or wiped from the active ledger.
It's a cosmic data cleansing process every Thursday.
Exactly.
They take the raw, chaotic footage of your life, the millions of hours of you just staring at the ceiling or chewing your food, and they cut it down to the actions that carry moral weight.
They trim the fat.
But what actually happens to those morally relevant actions? Where do they go? The theology outlines that this accounting is divided into 3 distinct registers, or diewins.
3 separate ledgers that categorize your entire moral existence.
Let's walk through these because the hierarchy here is mind-blowing.
The structure of these 3 diewins reveals the underlying priorities of the divine courtroom. The first register is categorized as the unforgivable.
The unforgivable.
Yes, this is the ledger strictly dedicated to polytheism or associating partners with God.
The foundational text states explicitly that God does not forgive that partners be set up with him, though he may forgive anything else to whom he pleases.
Right. Within this theological framework, acknowledging the absolute undivided singularity of the Creator is the baseline requirement for existence.
So violating that is considered the ultimate cosmic treason.
A fundamental severing of the relationship between the created and the Creator.
It's the one bridge you cannot burn if you want to participate in the ultimate economy of grace.
Exactly.
But the second register is where I really want to focus because this one completely redefines human interaction. The second ledger is the unignorable.
The unignorable.
This register has absolutely nothing to do with your private prayers or your personal theological beliefs. It is entirely 100% about the rights of others.
It's the ledger of oppression.
It's the ledger of wronging other creations. And the divine rule for this specific register is terrifyingly strict. God will not drop this, and God will not forgive it until the victim is fully compensated.
The divine literally steps back, points at the person you hurt, and says, "This is between you and them. My forgiveness is not applicable here until they get their due."
Which is, wow.
It is perhaps the most profound sociological mechanism within the entire belief system. It ensures absolute, impenetrable justice.
Because consider the alternative.
Right. If the system allowed a person to oppress their neighbor, steal their property, or slander their reputation, and then simply bypass that neighbor to ask God for direct forgiveness, the system would be fundamentally unjust.
The oppressor would experience a cheap, false sense of spiritual peace.
While the victim is left carrying the very real physical, financial, or emotional deficit of the crime.
So by placing the rights of other human beings in the unignorable register, the theology completely blocks the loophole of cheap grace.
You cannot use private divine forgiveness as an escape hatch to avoid public human accountability.
Let's bring this into the 21st century to really illustrate the weight of this.
Sure.
Because when we hear the word oppression, we tend to think of ancient kings with swords or cartoonish villains. But oppression today is so much more sanitized.
It really is.
It's the CEO who knowingly cuts safety corners, risking the lives of his factory workers just to bump up the quarterly dividend by a few cents.
Right.
It's the middle manager who subtly takes credit for a junior employee's brilliant presentation, stunting their career growth.
Or the partner in a relationship who uses gaslighting and emotional manipulation to break down the other person's self-esteem.
Exactly. Are you telling me that this theology believes the ultimate judge, Ad Deon, acts essentially as the cosmic union rep or defense attorney for those victims?
That is precisely what it means.
That the CEO can't just go to church or the mosque, pray really hard, donate to a charity, and wipe the slate clean.
Nope. The CEO's charitable donations might be recorded as good deeds in another ledger, but they do not erase the specific debt owed to the factory workers in the unignorable ledger.
Wow.
The middle manager's prayers do not cancel out the stolen intellectual property of the junior employee. The ledger of human rights is fiercely protected.
It forces the individual to look the person they hurt directly in the eye and make it right in the material world, or face the consequences in the next.
It elevates interpersonal morality to the exact same structural importance as private worship. You simply cannot have spiritual salvation if your social ledger is dripping with the unpaid debts of human exploitation.
And the level of detail is granular. It's not just about stealing millions of dollars. The historical accounts quote the prophet explicitly stating that rights will be restored even down to a physical slap.
Even a slap.
If you hit someone unjustly, that slap is preserved in the unignorable ledger.
Yep.
Which leaves us with the third register.
Yes, the third register is the forgivable. This ledger contains the sins committed strictly against oneself, or private shortcomings in one's direct relationship with God.
Like missing a voluntary prayer.
Exactly. Struggling with personal habits or private mistakes that do not infringe upon the rights of another living soul.
And the defining characteristic of this ledger is that God may simply choose to forgive these out of his infinite grace.
He doesn't necessarily even weigh them. If he so chooses, he just wipes them away.
Because the debt is solely to him, so He has the absolute right to pardon it without needing to compensate a third party.
Exactly.
Okay, so if we zoom out and look at this complete system, these perfectly kept ledgers, where every unearned slap, every stolen dollar, and every piece of vicious office gossip is permanently recorded, it begs a terrifying logistical question.
How does the payout work?
Exactly. What exactly does this final courtroom look like when it is time to settle these billions of microdebts? Because the people standing in this courtroom are dead. They don't have checkbooks. They don't have wire transfers. They can't hand over the keys to a house to settle a lawsuit. So how is justice actually executed?
Well, the scene painted by the historical and theological sources regarding the Day of Judgment is arguably one of the most intense, vivid depictions of accountability in human literature.
It's an intense gathering.
Very. All of humanity, from the very first human being to the last soul to ever live, alongside the entirety of the jinn and the angelic realm, are gathered in a single, incomprehensible expanse.
And the physical state of humanity at this gathering is profoundly symbolic.
They are resurrected completely and utterly bare. The terminology used is that they are naked, uncircumcised, and without a single worldly possession.
The specific Arabic word the scholars use here is bumin.
Yes.
It means having absolutely nothing with you. You have no wallet, you have no property deeds, you aren't wearing your designer clothes or your military medals.
No Ivy League academic degrees.
Your stock portfolio is non-existent. Every single external marker of earthly status, wealth, power, and hierarchy is violently and permanently stripped away.
You are standing in this cosmic expanse, exactly as vulnerable and penniless as the day you arrive in the birth canal.
It is the ultimate, inescapable equalizer. The billionaire stands shoulder to shoulder with the destitute refugee, and neither has an ounce of material leverage.
And in the midst of this unimaginable silence of billions of souls, the voice of Adain is heard.
Oh, it calls out.
Yes. And the sources note a fascinating detail regarding the acoustic physics of this moment. The voice is heard equally by those who are at the furthest edges of the gathering as it is by those standing nearest.
It entirely defies the physical laws of sound dissipation.
And the declaration is absolute and final. I am the king. I am Adain. At that moment, the fundamental, unbreakable rule of the cosmic court is established.
No one enters paradise and no one enters the fire if they owe a single right to another soul until that debt is settled.
Exactly.
Just pause and think about the implications of that rule. It's huge.
Even if you are a person destined for paradise, someone whose good deeds vastly outweigh their bad, someone who lived a generally righteous life, you are stopped at the literal gates of heaven if you owe a debt of justice to someone who is destined for hell.
And the reverse is also true.
Right. No one destined for hell can be thrown in if someone sitting in paradise owes them a right. The entire machinery of the afterlife halts for justice.
But we come back to the core problem you mentioned earlier. Everyone is naked and penniless.
So how do you pay the debt?
This is where the theology introduces the cosmic currency of justice. In a realm with no material wealth, debts are paid in the only currency that retains value: the spiritual equity of your good and bad deeds.
This brings us to the profound concept of the muflis.
The bankrupt man.
Yes, the bankrupt man. It is a concept that completely upends traditional religious thinking. There is a famous dialogue where the prophet asks his companions a simple question. He says, "Do you know who the bankrupt person is?" Naturally, the companions answer using the standard worldly definition. They say, "The bankrupt among us is the one who has no money, no property, and no assets."
Which is completely logical. If I ask you who is bankrupt, you point to the guy whose business went under and whose house was foreclosed on.
Exactly. But the prophet redefines the term for the reality of the cosmic courtroom. He tells them that the truly bankrupt person from his nation is someone who arrives on the day of judgment looking like a spiritual billionaire.
A spiritual billionaire.
This person comes with literal mountains of good deeds.
Yeah.
They performed all their prayers meticulously. They fasted for months. They gave massive amounts of charity. From a purely ritualistic standpoint, they were flawless.
But
But they arrive at the court with a sprawling, unignorable ledger full of social violations.
oh,
They slandered the reputation of a colleague. They physically struck a servant. They embezzled wealth from a business partner. They shed the blood of an innocent.
here's where it gets really interesting and honestly deeply disturbing if you're relying solely on your private worship. What happens next? The billionaire can't just say, "I'm sorry, I was really stressed at work that day."
No, the judge, Adain, demands immediate payment for the victims. So, the cosmic transfer of wealth begins.
Okay, how does that work?
The judge takes from the spiritual billionaire's good deeds. The reward for those decades of early morning prayers, it is forcibly transferred to the person whose reputation they slandered.
Wow.
This spiritual equity earned from all those days of fasting, it is wired directly into the account of the person they physically beat. Their charity is given to the business partner they cheated.
Their hard-earned spiritual equity is literally dismantled piece by piece and handed to their victims as compensation.
Exactly.
But let's follow this logic to its terrifying conclusion. What happens when the billionaire runs out of good deeds?
That's the scariest part.
Let's say he was a prolific bully. He gave away all his prayers, all his fasting, all his charity. But there is still a line of victims stretching out the door waiting for justice. The bank account of his soul hits zero. What then?
The sources state that the system doesn't just forgive the remaining debt. Instead, it reverses the flow.
It reverses.
When the good deeds run out, the victim's sins are taken and thrown onto the oppressor.
Oh my goodness. It is a devastating mechanism of justice.
The oppressor is forced to assume the spiritual debt of the people they victimized. They take on the sins of the ones they hurt. And then, completely bankrupt of their own good deeds and crushed under the weight of the sins of others, they are cast into the fire.
It is a total inversion of their perceived spiritual status.
Yes.
Entirely brought about not by a lack of ritual worship, but by their sheer cruelty toward other human beings. It is literal cosmic spiritual bankruptcy.
It's sobering.
Think about how we view worldly justice. In this world, justice is often about a wealthy corporation paying a fine out of a massive bank account that they will replenish by next quarter, or a person doing time in a prison where they can read books, work out, and eventually get paroled.
Right.
But this cosmic system transfers your very soul's equity, the late nights you spent praying in the dark, the hunger you endured while fasting, to the person you abused.
And there's this deeply emotional historical story in the texts that perfectly illustrates how seriously the early believers took this reality.
The story of the man and his slaves.
Yes. Walk us through that, because the power dynamics here are crucial.
It is a striking narrative that highlights the psychological shift we discussed earlier. A man approaches the prophet, and he is visibly distressed. He explains his domestic situation. He has several slaves, and by his own admission, they are difficult. They are disobedient, they lie to him, they betray his trust, and they fail to execute his orders. And in response to this constant frustration, the man admits that he regularly curses them, verbally abuses them, and physically beats them.
So he's asking for a preliminary audit.
Exactly. He asks, how do I stand with them? When I face the judge, how will this dynamic be weighed?
Which is an incredible question to ask in a 7th century society where he possessed every conceivable legal right to treat his property however he saw fit.
Right. The worldly courts were never going to punish him for beating his slaves.
He is entirely insulated from worldly consequence.
But the prophet explains the calculus of Adagon to him. He says that on the day of judgment, a precise scale will be established. The slave's betrayals, lies, and disobedience will be placed on one side of the scale.
And on the other side.
On the other side, the man's punishments, curses, and beatings will be placed. The prophet outlines 3 possible outcomes.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, if the man's physical punishment was exactly equal to their crimes, a perfectly proportional response, they are even. No harm, no foul. The ledger is balanced.
Okay, logical.
Second, if his punishment was actually less than their crimes, if he showed restraint when he could have struck harder, the man gains a surplus of good deeds for his mercy.
But the third outcome is the terrifying one.
Yes, the third outcome is that if the man's beatings and curses exceeded the actual weight of their misdeeds, if he was disproportionately harsh, abusive, or cruel out of anger, then the slaves will have the right to reach into his ledger on Judgment Day.
And take his good deeds to balance the scales.
Yes, they will extract their justice from his soul's equity.
And what is the man's reaction? Because again, society is telling him he is perfectly within his rights.
The historical account notes that the man steps aside and immediately breaks down into tears. He begins weeping and wailing in public. He is absolutely terrified by the prospect of this spiritual wealth transfer. The prophet looks at him in his distress and asks, "Do you not read the book of God? We shall set up scales of justice for the day of judgment, so that not a soul will be dealt with unjustly in the least."
And right then and there, the man makes a split-second, monumental financial decision.
He points to his slaves and says, "I find nothing better for me in them than parting ways. I bear witness to you that they are all free."
He emancipates all of them on the spot.
Yes. He voluntarily surrenders a massive amount of his worldly wealth and labor force simply to insulate himself from owing a cosmic debt to them in the afterlife.
He looked at the equation and realized he would rather be financially bankrupt in the temporal world than spiritually bankrupt in the eternal courtroom of Ediyan.
That is the ultimate proof of the psychological rewiring we were talking about at the start of the show. When you truly deeply believe that the currency of the afterlife is deeds and that human rights violations will drain your account, you begin to walk through the world with terrifying precision.
You watch your words.
You measure your anger. You treat the vulnerable, the people who have no worldly power, to fight back with extreme caution because you know they wield ultimate power over your ledger in the next life.
It creates a society built on radical empathy, born of profound accountability.
It really does.
And while the ledger of rights is unimaginably strict, it is vital to note that this system is heavily padded with an asymmetrical multiplier of grace.
Right, the system isn't just out to get you.
Not at all. The judge is not looking for ways to trap humanity. The sources highlight a beautiful dynamic regarding how intentions are scored.
Okay, break that down.
If a person simply intends to do a good deed, let's say they intend to give money to charity, but their car breaks down and they can't fly, that pure intention alone is recorded as one full good deed.
So you get paid just for wanting to do the right thing.
Yes, and if they actually execute the good deed, the reckoner multiplies it. It is recorded as 10 good deeds or 700 good deeds or even exponentially more depending on the purity of the heart.
But the math for bad deeds is entirely different.
Exactly. If someone intends to do a bad deed, they plan to steal something, but they stop themselves out of consciousness of God, that restraint is recorded as a good deed.
And if they actually follow through and commit the bad deed,
It is recorded as only one single bad deed. No multipliers. The system is structurally rigged in favor of human salvation.
the reckoner is literally looking for any valid excuse to reward you and maximize your equity.
That's a great way to put it.
But before we move on, I want to touch on the sheer speed of this event. Because if you have billions of humans and billions of jinn and billions of angels, and every single one of them has a multi-volume ledger detailing every word they ever spoke and every slap they ever gave.
Right.
Logically, it sounds like a bureaucratic nightmare. It sounds like a line at the DMV that would last for 10 million years. How does this audit actually happen in a conceivable time frame?
Well, the scholars address this exact logistical doubt. They describe the reckoning of Al-Hasib as lightning fast. It is often described in the text as occurring as quickly as the blink of an eye.
The blink of an eye.
Ali bin Abi Talib, one of the foremost early scholars, provided a beautiful analogy. When asked how God could possibly judge billions of entities simultaneously, he replied that God judges them all in a single day, just as effortlessly as he provides them with their daily sustenance in a single day right now.
Because he doesn't need to pull out a calculator.
No.
He doesn't need to cross-reference spreadsheets. The knowledge is immediate, total, and inherently integrated into his nature.
Exactly.
Okay, so we spent a lot of time on the concept of the reckoner, the unignorable ledgers, the spiritual bankruptcy. It is intense.
Very intense.
It is a massive amount of pressure to live under. But as we promised at the beginning, there is a deeply comforting, almost euphoric flip side to this coin.
The sufficiency.
Yes, and we are going to pivot there now. We are moving from the terror of the audit to the psychology of sufficiency, or kifaya.
Yes, we must return to the second parallel meaning of Al-Hasib, the one who is sufficient for creation. The theological framework takes great care to split this concept of sufficiency into two distinct categories to help the human mind grasp it.
What's the first category?
First, there is general sufficiency. This applies to absolutely everyone and everything in the cosmos. It is the fundamental baseline of existence.
So like the food we eat, the oxygen in the atmosphere.
The gravity that keeps our feet on the ground, the cellular division repairing our bodies. God acts as Al-Hasib for the devout believer and the vehement denier alike in this regard, unconditionally ensuring the physical universe continues to function and provide.
It's the baseline operating system of reality.
Right, but it's the second category, the special sufficiency, where the true psychological magic happens.
Special sufficiency. Okay.
Indeed. Special sufficiency is the targeted spiritual and worldly protection, the hyper-specific guidance and care provided exclusively to those who actively rely on him.
And the theology notes a fascinating psychological phenomenon here, right?
Yes. When a person truly internalizes Al-Hasib, in this special sense, when they believe in their bones that the creator of the universe is personally sufficient for their needs, It acts as an absolute solvent for two of the most debilitating, paralyzing human emotions.
It completely eradicates the anxiety over future provision, and it destroys the paralyzing fear of other human beings or worldly threats.
Exactly.
To illustrate how powerful this solvent is, the historical texts give us two massive high-stakes examples of this special sufficiency in action. And both of these examples are anchored by the invocation of a very specific Arabic phrase, Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil.
God is sufficient for us, and he is the best disposer of affairs.
Yes. The first example involves the prophet Abraham. Let's look at the physical stakes here.
The narrative of Abraham is the ultimate test of special sufficiency. According to the text, Abraham challenged the idolatry of his tyrannical society. In response, the leadership constructed a massive, raging inferno.
The heat was so intense they couldn't even approach it.
They had to build a catapult to launch him into the fire.
So in that agonizing moment of ultimate physical peril, literally flying through the air, looking down at a wall of flames that is scientifically guaranteed to incinerate him, his reliance does not waver.
He does not panic.
He does not. He invokes that exact phrase, Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil. His reliance is entirely on Al-Hasib.
And the result?
The text states that the fire was commanded by the divine to become cool and safe for him. The fundamental, unyielding natural laws of combustion and thermodynamics were instantly suspended by the one who authored them.
Why? Because his sufficiency for his servant overrides the physical causes of the universe.
He didn't ask for a sudden rainstorm. He didn't ask for a rescue team. He just stated that God was sufficient, and the universe bent to accommodate that sufficiency.
The second example is just as dramatic.
But it deals with human threats rather than environmental ones. It involves the Prophet Muhammad and his companions immediately following the Battle of Uhud. Let me set the scene for you because the psychological context is crucial here. The companions had just suffered a devastating, bloody defeat. They were exhausted, traumatized, physically injured, and actively mourning the deaths of their closest friends and family members.
Their morale was at absolute rock bottom.
And in the midst of this PTSD and vulnerability, they receive intelligence that the massive, heavily armed enemy army from Mecca is gathering its forces again to march back and finish them off, to wipe them off the map permanently.
The rational human biological response to that news is utter, paralyzing panic.
It's the fight-or-flight response, kicking into overdrive when you have no ability to fight and nowhere to fly.
It is the absolute peak of vulnerability. But the text records their collective response. They did not succumb to panic. They anchored themselves in the same linguistic and psychological reality as Abraham.
They stated en masse, Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil. God is sufficient for us.
And the historical outcome is fascinating. They didn't even have to engage in a second battle.
Wait, really?
No. Their profound, unified reliance on Al-Hathib triggered a psychological mechanism in their enemies. God cast a wave of inexplicable dread and sheer psychological terror into the hearts of the opposing, vastly superior army.
Despite having the upper hand, the enemy forces broke and retreated.
Exactly.
In both of those cases, the physical worldly threat was overwhelming, an unquenchable fire, a massive bloodthirsty army. But the internal psychological state of those individuals was completely shielded, almost bulletproofed, by their understanding of Al-Hasib.
They refused to look at the fire or the swords as the ultimate reality.
They looked through the fire and the swords directly at the creator who controlled them. Okay, let's unpack this because the sources make a brilliant paradigm-shifting point here about everyday causality.
Yeah, the ATM analogy.
Yes. I want to push you, the listener, to rethink how you view cause and effect in your daily life. Because we all walk around thinking in a very linear, horizontal way.
We do.
We think a mother is sufficient to feed a baby. We think the sun is sufficient to warm the earth. We think our job, our paycheck, our boss is sufficient to pay our rent and keep us alive.
But this theology argues that this entire horizontal view is a fundamental illusion.
Yes. These things, the mother, the sun, the job, are just tools. It's like standing in front of an ATM, getting your cash, and then weeping with gratitude and thanking the plastic machine, completely forgetting the massive, complex banking institution that holds your account.
Forgetting the software engineers who coded the network and the entire global economy that gives that piece of paper actual value.
The ATM is just the final dumb mechanism of delivery. The text points out that Al-Hasib created the mother's immense capacity for love. He designed the biological mechanics to produce the milk. He coded the baby's instinctual drive to latch.
The mother is not the ultimate source of the sufficiency. She is merely the beautiful biological conduit for Al-Hasib's sufficiency.
Which brings up a huge point.
This raises an important question, and it is perhaps the most vital, liberating question of this entire analysis. If we could truly, deeply internalize that the ultimate source of every single provision, every drop of water you drink, every promotion you get, every moment of physical protection you experience originates from this one infinite divine entity, how much of our exhausting daily anxiety would just evaporate?
So much of it.
We spend our entire lives frantically, desperately trying to please the ATMs of our lives. We flatter our bosses. We compromise our morals for our social circles. We obsess over our bank accounts, terrified that if these tools break or reject us, we will starve or be ruined.
We're living under the tyranny of the middleman.
But if you recognize Al-Hasib, you realize the actual bank is infinitely wealthy, it never closes, and it never runs out of capital. The texts explicitly argue that recognizing this reality doesn't just bring peace.
What does it bring?
It leads directly to a profound, overwhelming love for the divine. You cannot help but love the entity that cares for you so flawlessly, so quietly, behind the scenes of every single moment of your life.
It frees you. You respect the tools, you utilize the tools, but you no longer worship the tools.
Precisely.
But, and this is the crucial pivot of the whole deep dive, if we accept this reality, if we accept that God is both the ultimate judge holding the terrifying ledgers of our social behavior and the ultimate provider completely sustaining us, it necessitates a massive proactive shift in how we manage our own daily behavior.
You can't just float passively through life with that knowledge.
You have to act. Which brings us to the ultimate life hack derived from these concepts, proactive muhasaba or self-reckoning.
Muhasaba is the pragmatic operational application of everything we have discussed today.
Right.
The logic is impenetrable. With absolute certainty that a flawless micro-level audit is coming from Ad-Dayan, the only rational, intelligent response is to aggressively audit yourself first.
You must find your own errors before the judge points them out.
Yes. The historical texts lean heavily on a famous foundational quote from Umar bin al-Khattab, one of the closest companions of the Prophet. He said, "Weigh yourselves before you are weighed, and reckon yourselves before you are reckoned, for it will be easier upon you in the account tomorrow if you reckon yourselves today."
It is the ultimate preemptive strike against spiritual bankruptcy, and the scholars provide this phenomenal, highly pragmatic business analogy to explain exactly how to execute this self-audit.
They say you need to start treating your own soul exactly like you would treat a business partner.
Think about it. Anyone who has ever run a business knows you do not blindly trust a partner with the finances. No matter how much you like them, you demand to see the receipts.
You check the books.
In this spiritual corporation you are running, your base capital, the money you need just to keep the lights on and the doors open, are your mandatory obligations, your daily prayers, your fasting, your baseline morality.
Right. And the extra good deeds you do.
Uh,
Helping a neighbor, giving extra charity, that is your profit margin.
and your sins, your gossip, your outbursts of anger, those are your catastrophic financial losses.
And the practical process of this self-audit happens in two distinct critical phases.
Okay, lay them out.
First, there is the pre-action audit. Before you undertake any action, you force yourself to pause. You interrogate your own soul. You ask, is this action actually permissible? Is it necessary?
And most importantly, what is the core intention driving it?
Exactly. Am I doing this for a higher purpose, to please the divine? Or is this entirely driven by my ego, my desire to show off, or my need for validation from the people around me?
If you realize the action is driven by pure ego, the texts advise you to immediately abandon it. Because from a cosmic accounting perspective, an ego-driven deed will be recorded as a complete loss anyway.
Why invest the energy into a guaranteed deficit?
Exactly. And then there is the post-action review. You get to the end of your day and you sit down to review the tape.
Did I do my best? Did I waste 4 hours doom scrolling when I could have been productive?
And here is a brilliant nuance. The scholars say that even with mundane things, like eating a meal or taking a nap, you can audit your intentions to turn them into profit.
How so?
Well, for example, you can say, I am eating this food not just to satisfy my biological hunger, but specifically so, I have the physical energy to help my elderly neighbor clean her yard tomorrow.
Wow.
Suddenly, by layering a conscious moral intention over a basic mammalian habit, that mundane bowl of pasta becomes spiritual profit in the ledger.
That is brilliant. It is entirely about maximizing the efficiency and purity of your spiritual ledger. And the historical sources provide a beautiful narrative hack related to this self-reckoning, specifically focusing on how the way we audit others impacts how we will be audited.
The story of the wealthy man.
Yes. There's a famous story of a wealthy man from the past who died. When he stood before Ad-Dayan, it was revealed that he had absolutely no good deeds to his name, none.
He was spiritually destitute.
But he had one very specific, consistent practice during his earthly life. Because he was wealthy, he often loaned money. And he used to instruct his servants that when they went out into the city to collect his debts, if they encountered a poor person who genuinely could not pay, they were to immediately forgive the debt.
He would tell his servants, "Perhaps God will forgive us."
He instituted a policy of extreme leniency in his worldly audits of other people.
He refused to crush people over their debts.
Right. And on the day of judgment, as this man stands terrified before Ad-Dayan with an empty ledger of good deeds, the divine responds to that exact practice.
God says to him, "We are more worthy of leniency than him," and completely, entirely forgives the man.
The underlying immutable rule of the cosmos is revealed in that interaction. The exact manner in which you audit the flaws and debts of others in this life is the exact manner in which Ad-Dayan will audit your flaws and debts in the next.
If you are harsh, exacting, deeply unforgiving, and demand every single cent and apology you are owed from the people around you, the reckoner will be harsh, exacting, and unforgiving with your ledger.
But if you are gentle, if you overlook slights, if you forgive debts, the reckoner will overlook your slights and forgive your immense cosmic debts.
So what does this all mean for us, the listeners, walking around in the modern world? It means that mindfulness isn't just about downloading a meditation app and doing deep breathing exercises.
True mindfulness is a rigorous, daily, unsparing ledger review.
If you wouldn't let a business partner handle your life savings without checking the receipts, why on earth would you let your own ego, your own volatile impulses, run the trajectory of your eternal soul without a daily audit?
And there is a fantastic structural framework for this, provided by the early scholar Wahab bin Munabi.
Yes, the 4 hours of the wise.
He suggests that a truly wise person should actively divide their waking day into 4 distinct hours or phases. It is a masterclass in time management and psychological health.
Let's go through them. The first hour.
The first hour is dedicated entirely to conversing with God. This is the time for prayer, for supplication, for building that direct, vertical connection with the sufficient provider.
The second hour is specifically dedicated to the muhasabah we just discussed. This rigorous self-reckoning, sitting down in isolation and critically going through the books of your own behavior.
Right.
The third hour is the one I find most fascinating and, frankly, the hardest to implement.
Oh, definitely.
It's an hour spent deliberately with honest friends who point out your flaws. Not your drinking buddies, not the friends who flatter you and validate all your bad decisions.
But people who love you enough to look you in the eye and tell you the ugly truth about your arrogance, your selfishness, or your blind spots, so you can fix your ledger before the ultimate judge sees it. It requires immense vulnerability, but it is essential for an accurate audit.
And finally, the fourth hour is carved out for permissible enjoyment, to eat good food, to rest, to engage in lawful pleasures and hobbies.
Because the theology recognizes human limits. The soul and the body need to recharge in order to have the psychological strength and resilience to perform the demanding work of the other 3 hours.
It is a perfectly balanced, holistic prescription for a healthy human psyche.
Implementing this routine of internal auditing breeds immense humility and actively destroys arrogance.
Yeah.
When you are constantly, daily reviewing your own flaws, and when you rely entirely on the sufficiency of Al-Hasib rather than the fickle approval of society, you stop obsessing over other people's opinions.
You stop trying to aggressively manage your PR with the world. You step off the treadmill of seeking validation, and you focus the entirety of your energy on the only audit that ultimately matters. Wow, we have covered an incredible expanse of ground today. We started by unpacking the deep linguistic roots of Al-Hasib, the sufficient reckoner, and Ad-Dayan, the ultimate judge.
We walked through the intense, terrifying imagery of the cosmic courtroom, the intricate mechanics of the 3 registers of deeds, and that brilliant, sobering concept of spiritual bankruptcy, where the bully pays the victim with their own soul's equity.
But we also balance that by exploring the immense anxiety-destroying comfort of divine sufficiency, where the fire cools for Abraham and the massive armies flee from the minds of the believers.
And finally, we landed on the highly practical, everyday tool of daily self-reckoning, treating our souls like business partners to ensure our ledgers are clean before that final, inescapable audit. It is a profoundly elegant system. It balances the extremes of human emotion, fear, and hope, strict accountability, and total reliance.
It is perfectly designed to produce a human being who is both deeply, rigorously moral in their treatment of others and entirely unshakably at peace in their reliance on the divine. I want to leave you, the listener, with a final lingering thought built upon all the concepts we've explored today. Think about how we usually measure a productive day in our hyper-capitalist modern world.
Usually, productivity is measured by emails sent, money deposited in the bank, tasks aggressively crossed off a to-do list, or the engagement metrics on a social media post.
But if the cosmic currency, the only currency that survives the grave, is entirely based on your moral treatment of others and the pure, uncorrupted nature of your intentions, as we saw so clearly with the bankrupt man,
Right.
then a day where you achieved absolutely zero professional milestones, where you made no money, but you managed to hold your tongue in a moment of extreme anger, you quietly forgave someone a debt they owed you, and you sat quietly, purely relying on the sufficiency of the divine.
That day might actually be the most profitable, highly productive day of your entire life.
Just something to mull over as you go about your week. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep auditing those ledgers, keep relying on the sufficient, and we'll catch you next time.